I'm just told that practice will happen tonight for the Baltimore Ravens. They will have their walkthrough, even though the game has been postponed from Tuesday to Wednesday. That capped a fairly active hour of information that I was getting about critical mass that was arriving for the Ravens and the Steelers. What I had been told by a very good source connected to the union, as opposed to my usual not very good sources, but that never stops me, is that there was fear that Ravens players would say, we aren't playing, period. We refuse to play. And that would constitute technically a wildcat strike. Now, every collective bargaining agreement has a provision that says there shall be no lockout, no strike during the term of the deal. It's only after the deal expires that it becomes legal for management to lock out the workforce or the workforce to go on strike. But under certain circumstances, and I don't want this to turn into continuing legal education for anyone out there who needs a labor law credit, under certain circumstances, the workforce can say, we're not working. And usually in a industrial setting, it arises when there's some sort of a safety issue. And Charean, there's a safety issue here in the minds of the players because they look at not being able to gather, not being able to practice, not being able to prepare as a potential safety risk for them when it's time to play the Steelers, especially when you're calling up all these guys that don't have a lot of experience who are being thrust into a new role. Peter King pointed out that the guy who's playing center for the Ravens, and I don't even remember who the guy is, I mean, he's going to be nose-to-nose with Cam Hayward for crying out loud. And the guy's never played center in the NFL before. That's the kind of physical risk you're getting into. So the Ravens said, we may not play. The Ravens players said we may not play. And it looks like the NFL blinked and said, okay, we'll move the game to Wednesday and give you a chance to prepare between Monday and Tuesday.
Sort of seems like a Hail Mary for the NFL right here, Mike, that they had to do this. They had to give the Ravens more time, even though I'm sure that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to play this game, and in some respects, I'm sure they feel like they're giving Baltimore a little bit more of an advantage than they should have. I don't think they are. Baltimore's still going to be shorthanded. And if I'm RG3, I am scared, as you said, of my physical health going into this game because with that offensive line and the lack of offensive linemen that he's going to have, starting offensive linemen, his health would seem to be in grave danger going into this game against this defense. And, you know, I'm sure the Broncos are sitting here today, too, right now, probably thinking, why didn't we think of this yesterday and refuse to play yesterday? Not quite the same circumstances, but it was in the sense that they had no chance in that game yesterday. Just as I think, I don't care how far down the line you move this game, unless you move it to week 18. Nobody's giving the Ravens a chance to win this game, Mike, with all the guys they still have on the COVID list.
This is high-stakes poker for the players to engage in. And in hindsight, maybe the Broncos players should have risen up and said, we aren't going to play in this game with no quarterbacks. Now, what did happen was Broncos management, from CEO Joe Ellis to GM John Elway to Coach Vic Fangio, lobbied the NFL aggressively to bump the game back. I'm told until today, because technically they could have gotten the three quarterbacks who weren't positive for COVID-19 back today, Drew Lock, Brett Rippon, and Blake Bortles. The league said, no, we're not doing that. We don't postpone games for competitive reasons. Okay, fine. But if the players had said, we're just not going to play, that's what would have raised the stakes here. And who knows what the league would have said, because if you're the players, what you're doing is you're going all in with your game check, because the Broncos players got paid for Sunday by playing. If you refuse to play and the game would get canceled, then you don't get paid pursuant to the agreement that was struck back in August between the league and the union. And the other problem is this, and this is what has the NFL Players Association concerned, I'm told. If there would be a wildcat strike that would violate the terms of the agreement that was struck back in August to allow the season to go forward, there is concern that the league would say, fine, we're going to rip up the entire agreement. We're going to pull the plug on the season because we are swimming in red ink here, and this is our exit ramp. This is our easy way out. This is our path to stop the bleeding. See you later, rest of season. That would be an extreme example, but the union, in order to be prudent in protecting the interests of all of its constituents, needs to at least be concerned about that possibility. So, hasn't happened yet, isn't happening as it relates to the Ravens, because they got the game bumped today, and presumably now the Ravens players will stand down and get ready for the game. But there's a way these dominoes just careen out of control, and you end up with possibly the season being thrown in the wastebasket, although I'd be stunned if that happens, although let's rewind to January 1 and go through the events of 2020, and how stunned would you be if you knew back at the turn of the year what we were in for? So you can't rule anything out at this point.
It's crazy, Mike. I was just thinking about that. All the things we're talking about today. Who would have dreamed, a few weeks ago, even in the midst of all this, that we'd be talking about what we're talking about today? It's just incredible. This whole year, this whole season, everything's just been incredible and crazy. And, we were texting on Saturday, and I texted to you guys that I felt like this was a house of cards, and it really felt like it was about to come down for the NFL. Between the 49ers situation with being kicked out of their stadium and their practice facility, and then with the Ravens, all their positives, with the Broncos not having a quarterback, it just seemed like all the buildup for the entire season has come down to this. And the league has been, in my view anyway, lucky to get to the point now where they have not had a game postponed to Week 18. But it's really looking like we are close to either hitting the pause button or moving to that Week 18 as things continue to develop. It's just been a wild few days.
Yeah, and the Week 18 scenario, and like so many other things that relates to this season, Charean, it has to come into full focus to truly understand what the potential issues would be. And I was playing this out today. Okay, Ravens-Steelers, it goes to Week 18. It becomes the first game that moves to Week 18. Every Ravens-Steelers game after that is operating on a tightrope without a net, because if the Ravens have an issue, if the Steelers have an issue, if any of their opponents have issues, and that game has to be postponed, wait a minute, where do you postpone it to? Week 18 is already spoken for as it relates to the Ravens and the Steelers. What if Steelers-Bills can't be played in 2 weeks because of a COVID issue with either Pittsburgh or Buffalo? And we don't know what's going to happen once the dust settles on the post-Thanksgiving spread on top of the spread. What if that game can't be played? What if that's where we're headed? So how do you pick and choose? How do you prioritize if you're the league? Do you say, well, all right, the first one we postponed was Ravens-Steelers, so that's the one that gets played Week 18, even though Steelers-Bills, once we play all the other games, may have more relevance to more teams and may be a bigger game, and also would be a more compelling game to the extent that we're trying to make back some money and we want to broadcast some games in national windows. Steelers-Bills, better game. Ravens-Steelers, Ravens stink, or at least they're currently in the midst of stink. Who knows where they'll be Week 18. I think whatever would happen, Charean, if games get postponed to a Week 18, I think the league would end up just postponing indefinitely with no commitment that that's the game that'll be played Week 18, because you don't want to paint yourself into a corner, because there could be a more important game involving one of those two teams that you would rather play in Week 18.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense, Mike. And I think you've called it the nuclear option for the NFL, which is what it seems like. That is the worst case scenario for them. They don't want to do that. We know that. They want to try to get all these games in, which is why now they're going to jam this game in. You're going to have a game on Wednesday, and you're obviously going to have to move back that Steelers game that was set for Sunday. You're going to have to move that one back to Monday or Tuesday of next week. So now suddenly the Steelers are playing all these games in here. Forget the mini bye they were supposed to have. They're going to have a bunch of games here in a row, just as the Ravens are, if they can get these games in. But that's the hope, that now that they can play this game on Wednesday and we don't have to have that postponement that we're talking about. And I agree with you. You don't want to do it because you don't know what's going to happen down the line. This, Mike, it's getting worse by the week. It's getting worse out in the communities, and now we've seen it getting worse within teams. The Patriots just today put Julian Edelman on the COVID list. Every day we're starting to see guys go on here. Big name guys are going on, and you see what happened with the Broncos with no quarterback.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.